Pretty good.
Yeah.
Are we ready to start? Good, thank you. Sorry, I got tied up with the new commissioner, and I guess I talked too long. Never happens to you, does it, Mayor Bashinsky? Talk too long, but good. So I'll call the meeting to order and do a roll call, please.
Alta. Bigwood.
Here.
Bochensky.
Here.
Bonchak.
Here.
Broussard. Or Kaiser.
Here.
Karlsruhe.
Here.
Erdman.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Mahoney.
Here.
Nilsson. Schmaltz.
Here.
This is Brian Riley for Keith Nielsen.
Thank you, Brian.
Yep.
And Schmidt.
Here.
I don't have to wait for Veen anymore, huh? No? Mayor Brandon Brushinsky has taken over Ken Veen's position. We want to thank Ken for his hard work and efforts through that time. Sometimes every now and then he'd make a comment, so you're welcome to start us off with the tradition that you guys always seem to make a comment, but welcome aboard to the board. And I want to thank all the board members. It was short notice for this meeting, but we had some items we wanted to get discussed and kind of go through. And so I appreciate everybody that showed up and is online. Brandon?
Well, I'll just be quick. I know I'm not as young and good looking as Ken is, but I'll try to make up for it by working hard. Ken had asked me to fill this role. He'd obviously done it for a long time, very knowledgeable. He's also a Garrison board member. The city of Grand Forks elects who's going to be on LAWA, so we went through that process. And Ken had asked me to step up and take the role, and the city council agreed. So happy to be here. Obviously, crucially important time to keep the project moving forward. So thanks for the time.
Thank you. Do you have a motion to approve the order of agenda?
So moved, Schmidt.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Is there a motion to approve the reading and consideration of the minutes for January 16th and March 1st?
So move. I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Good.
Sorry, who seconded, Jim?
I did.
Okay, thank you.
User engagement and sign up update. Steve Burrian. I'm pleased to say that Steve will show us the table here today, and we've been concerned about how it would go with the users. And we've had great meetings so far. So it's really, we've always kind of concerned about how many users would sign up or what would happen. But Steve, I appreciate your one table that you have that starts showing us how people are responding to your meetings.
Kim, are you able to, or do I need to do something?
Yeah.
Just click on it?
Yes.
Okay. I know how to do that too. Thank you. Yep. Chairman Mahoney, members of the board, as Mayor Mahoney indicated, they've asked me to do a brief talk on user engagement. In previous discussions, you know that the board and Garrison Diversion authorized to go out and to have a series of regional meetings, and we've completed all of those with the exception that Fargo has asked to also have one after being super involved in the project. They recognize that there'd be benefit to having one as well. Then I think Grand Forks is considering some type of hybrid for that type of meeting also. In addition to that, then after the regional meetings, because we started asking them to be prepared for the memorandum of commitment and the items associated with that, and Tammy will talk about that in a few minutes, people started to realize that it was really time to fish or cut bait. And so we started getting quite a few calls for either follow-up information or follow-up meetings or one-on-one meetings. And so we've just been busy traveling the whole region. And what you see in front of you is a map that Mayor Mahoney mentioned that we've completed. It's slightly different than the map that you see in your handout just because this is as of yesterday, and so it has the latest and greatest information. And of all the users that we have that we've reached out to, you can see that we've categorized those users according to a green, which means that they still sound like they're encouraged that they'll participate in the project in some way, shape, or form. Although I think some of them could nominate for a bit smaller capacity, and some may even nominate for a bit more. You'll also see 4 bright greens on there. Those are systems that didn't sign up in 2016. that for whatever reason have showed interest when we went back to him, and that was one of Dwayne's edicts, that he wanted us to turn every stone over again in this region, just to make sure that if somebody, had missed the boat the first time, that they didn't have an excuse by going out and contacting them. So Lakota in the central part of the state, Breckenridge across from Wapaton, Oakstown in the southeast corner, and Washburn are all considering membership, even though they're not part of the development agreement. Those in black are ones that we would say are either on the fence or possibly leaning towards a declination in some way, shape, or form, or a significant reduction in capacity. And then those are in red are the ones where we received a formal declination. And we've only received, if you look in that upper left-hand corner on the chart, only 1.2 CFS of full declination on a 159.23 CFS project. So we're, doing quite well. And the three that have declined is South Central around the Bismarck area. They have 2 supplies on the Missouri River already and decided a third one wasn't necessary. Central Plains in the middle part of the project, which is unfortunate because they're right on the pipeline, but they just didn't feel they were a good fit. And then Mackville, a very small community to the south and east of Devil's Lake, had a very small nomination and indicated just this week that they wouldn't be involved. You can see then for those that are either looking at significant reductions or on the fence, we have about 19 cubic feet per second that we're still working through, and we're trying really hard to encourage all of them to participate. And then lastly, we have about 142 CFS that we still feel is quite positive. And so there could be some trades between the green and the black, but that's where we stand as of now. And a lot of this was my judgment based on the meetings, but then I ran it past Garrison and I ran it past Lawa reps, and nobody felt that these judgments needed to be changed at this point in time. Just by way of maybe consideration, you'll remember that the project has 2 major benefits. One is to drought-proof the region. So if we have a severe drought like the 30s or the 80s or even 2021 in the future, it's anticipated that we'll need to bring Missouri River water in to back feed Lake Ashtabula. But when we went to a state-only project, instead of having to convince the Bureau of Reclamation that we needed water for industry, we were given the green light to go out and meet with the users and determine how much water they thought they might need for industry. And so again, using judgment, and this was at Paul Boersma and Kip's request, I tried to aggregate where I thought there were similar regions where either they got their supply from the same spot or they were partnered with other people nearby. And you can see I broke it up into 7 regions. Southeast, that represents all of Southeast Water Users District. I put Jamestown Valley City, Stutzman, and Barnes together. Fargo already serves Cass County, so that was an easy one. Dakota Rural Water is right off the end of the pipeline and already partners with Cooperstown and Hannaford, so that was easy. The one in the northwest corner is a little bit unique because that water comes off the pipeline, but there is a pipeline then that goes all the way from Devil's Lake up to Langdon that many people may not know about. And so that gray area is already tied together. And then if you look at the Grand Forks area, I could see that one potentially staying aggregated or maybe having some sub-splits depending on how it all evolved. But those were kind of the logical partners in the Grand Forks area. And then when you get way up in that northeast corner, it gets to be a long push from anywhere. And so I grabbed Walsh and the eastern half of Northeast and partnered them with Grafton and Park River. And then what I did is by nomination, I just looked at where all of them are at. And so you can see in the pie chart there, if you were looking at how much industrial development could be potentially stood up in any one of those colored areas, you can look at the slice and then look at how many CFS they've nominated for. The only caveat that I have is when you get to the big cities, they do have quite a bit of wastewater that they're discharging on a regular basis, and they should be able to use a large chunk of that wastewater in the future while still meeting the project objectives. And so I asked Rick Fargo Cass and I asked Rick Grand Forks because I'm guessing that the effective capacity for those 2 communities is much larger than that if they look at their wastewater return flows. In fact, I've done some work with Fargo, and I think we can get over 50 CFS of industrial capacity if we combine the project with some return flow capture as well. Lastly then, just by way of brevity, given the significant agenda you have, you can see that we started with 159.23 CFS of nominations under the original 16 development agreements. We've had 1.2 decline. That gives us a net of about 157. And for those green users that I showed you in bright green, if they were to nominate where we think they may, that would be an additional 2.75. And so we'd actually be just a bit north of where we thought we were going to be. I could see some additional trade-offs if Jamestown and Stutzman, for instance, were to participate at a lower level, and maybe that southeast corner picked up a little bit more. We could see a few trade-offs there, but I think we're going to be pretty close. And then one last thing is we always felt that there might be a pool of water available for additional users, but we also recognize that if we don't get a full 159.23, that we're going to have to reallocate those costs to the remaining users. And I think those remaining users thought about that and said, well, if I'm paying the money, I might as well take the water. And so I think that there's probably a mind shift sentiment in the project where as we get done with this process and we reallocate those costs, I think we're also going to end up reallocating that water. And I'd be very surprised if there was any water available after the PPA is eventually signed at the end of the year. With that, I know I have very limited time, but I'd be glad to answer any questions. We also understand you're thinking about monthly board meetings, and we'd be glad to get into more specificity at the next meeting.
Thank you, Steve. Dwayne, you want to add to it at all as far as how the meeting's been going?
I've attended most of them, and they've been very positive. I mean, it's just the ones that have declined were the ones we had all negativity. I mean, the rest of them were either, we like this idea, we need to figure out how to pay for it, or we're already in need of the water and we've got to do it. So I'm with Steve. I'm pretty positive we're going to fill up the pipe.
Any questions by the commission?
Can I just add one more? I guess I always remember one more thing. One of the ideas that Tammy Norgard had several months ago is there are, within state statute, there's the ability to use 4 mills of economic development money by county, and she felt that this would be a pretty worthy economic development project. So as we've been working with some of the districts, regions that are out there, some of them have actively engaged their counties. And so I'm going to sneak out right after Tammy's presentation because I've been asked to speak at a 5-county meeting of Richland, Ransom, Sargent, Dickey, and Lemoore County down in the southeast corner to try to see if they won't use part of their mill levies to help support the southeastern corner of the state. And we've also heard where other parts of the region are looking at a similar strategy. The only caveat I have, I'm looking right at Bill for a moment, is if they've already used the 4, there is no more capacity for that. And I know Trail County is one example. I know Walsh County is another example where, as Sean did the research for us, we found that some of the counties have already used their entire 4 mills.
Thank you. Our next item is Memorandum of Commitment, Series D, Small System Amendment. Tammy Norgard, please.
All right, thank you very much. We don't have copies of the agreements actually in your materials, and part of the reason for that is they've all gone out to all the different users. The way this is set up, as you've heard from Steve and Dwayne, they've gone out and had a series of meetings with the users. They just wanted to show them some financial numbers, talk about what the expectations would be. We didn't want to overwhelm them with a bunch of paperwork right away. So after those introductory meetings, then we have sent out in the last week the memorandum of commitment. And we have, a few things that we're trying to accomplish with that. First of all, I'll tell you that the draft memorandum of commitment has gone through some of the bigger systems, their attorneys. It's gone through bond counsel just to make sure that, most of the bigger players at the table have looked at it and think it's going to be fine. And so it's been sent out. The first point that I'll make on it is it's a memorandum of commitment. And so there's things in it that are binding and then there are things in it that are not. And one of the first things that it says is that you intend to sign the PPA by the end of the year. So we're hoping to get signatures on this memorandum of commitment by the end of July. What this says is I intend to sign the PPA when it's in final form. And so it's your system's intent to commit. Now that isn't binding, right? So how are we putting teeth in that? Well, really what we need to do is we need to know what the nominations are so that they can do all the final paperwork and the final calculations in order to put them in the PPA. So the second thing you do is you identify how much your nomination is. And then when we're looking at the work plan, the 23-25 work plan, so far we've only been able to fund about 82% of that, and that's based on the Series D interim financing agreement that was signed by Grand Forks and Fargo. So Grand Forks and Fargo said, we'll fund up to 82% of this work plan, but not the rest. And what we decided to do is go forward with Fargo and Grand Forks, and we said when we figure out which small systems are going to be a part of this, then we're going to have them sign an amendment to it. So we're calling this the Small Systems Amendment to the Series D. So that's the other thing you're committing to do, is signing that Small Systems Amendment. And so by signing that, you're committing to pay for your share of this biennium's work plan. And so even though, you know, this a memorandum of commitment isn't necessarily binding you to participate in the PPA, it's binding the entities to pay their fair share, and so nobody's going to go into it too lightly. I think everyone's going to be very serious about whether they're in or out. And they don't get any refund if they don't be a part of the project. If the numbers change at all, then we're going to do a little true up of all the numbers when you go into the final PPA, so you'll only be paying for what you end up nominating for. With this small system amendment, again, this has also been run through the bond council, so I think that everyone, a big group at the beginning has taken a look at it, are very comfortable with the language that's in it. And then the final thing I just wanted to address is that I've only been to one of the user meetings, but it was pretty clear that the city that I went to was really interested in the project, but they're like, boy, it's just, you know, there's some risk here. And so one thing that I'm suggesting is maybe doing a cooperation agreement or a cooperative nomination agreement or a joint nomination agreement. So we floated that idea by some of the systems that said if you have a couple cities and a rural water district, the three of you could go together and do a joint nomination agreement and sign one memorandum of commitment and bind yourself together. So you just need kind of this background agreement of you're all going to work together and you're going to take X amount of water and pay for that, and you have to work it out amongst yourselves how you're going to use that. The cooperative nomination agreement is a little bit different, where the idea is, let's say there's two cities in a water system. Those cities feel more comfortable nominating for a water supply if they know that if somebody comes and locates, if an industry locates near the city, that they can also share with the rural water district. So it's kind of a sharing agreement that they're going to cooperate with each other to share water in the event an industry locates. So it's just a little less risk, less scary. We've sent some forms of that out just to help people get started on talking to one another about how they can work together to meet some regional goals. So all of that has gone out in the last week. We anticipate some questions on that as we move forward. We're always happy to answer questions on that, and feel free to give us any feedback.
Any questions or comments? Thank you, Tammy.
Yep.
Good. Kip, Technical Advisor Committee. Kip Colbart, explain.
Can you hear me? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Al Grasser couldn't be here today from the Technical Advisory Committee, so he asked that I fill in for him. So I'll give you a quick rundown of what we covered at the TAC, and then there's a series of action items that or a series of recommendations for you to take up. So the TAC met on June 19th. We covered the following topics. We reviewed the 2024 construction update of the pipeline projects. We reviewed a change order under Contract 5B. We also looked at and approved an amendment for construction phase services. And then lastly, under Contract 5D, they approved a change order for tunnel removal, and you'll be hearing about those. A couple other items that were discussed in the TAC were wetland crossings and how we cross wetlands, specifically jurisdictional wetlands. Because we don't have enough time today, we'll bring that back to you next meeting, but you're gonna really like that topic. That is a money saver that we're gonna bring forward to you, so be looking for that. We also talked about contract 6A. So 6A is the last piece that we have not acted on in your biennium work plan. So, like Agassiz asked us to hold up on not bidding that one until we have the small users figured out. So we're getting close to that point. And so in July, we'd like to bring that back to you about how do we do that strategy. They also received an update from Black & Veatch on all the facilities and pipeline design. So starting work on the water treatment plant and the main pump stations. Reviewed the biennium work plan. And then the last two items that the TAC heard were an update from Steve Burring on the user meetings. And then also Dan Portlock gave a operational planning subcommittee report. So those were the items the TAC reviewed. And then as part of the committee report, I don't know if you want me to go right into the items that are in your board book there for action. Would you like me to do that? Okay. I'm going to pull up the PowerPoint. And Kim, I have to go into presentation mode. Okay, so the first change order under contract 5B, I'd like to review with you today. There are 11 change orders wrapped up into this summary. There are two bigger ones I'd like to point out, but going down the list, we have 2023 dewatering discharge items for $965,000. We had bid items adjustments for removal of stockpile and topsoil, $28,000. Topsoil weed control and stabilization, $94,000. Drain tile modifications, a deductive, so back to the project, $5,000. Canadian Pacific Railway, there was some flooding along the railroad, $72,000. Canadian Pacific Railway tunnel changes due to differing site conditions, $822,000. Elimination of a shoe fly, money back to the project for $13,000. Crop damages, coming back to the project because that's going to be paid by the contractor. And then the last three items there in summary are just actual quantities that were installed in the field being brought forward. So they installed a little bit more than what we anticipated, so those are being brought forward in the change order. I would like to talk about two specific items on here. I'd like to talk about the dewatering and the differing site conditions for the tunnel. Feel free to ask questions about any of them, but I was going to tackle the two big ones. So first one is the dewatering to a blue line stream. 12 miles of piping were installed and multiple pumping units were installed at different locations. I have a couple pictures here for you to kind of show you. So they had several crews out in the field, and when they dig the trench and they have to dewater, that water can't just be pumped into the farmer's field next door and fill up his slough, because then you have crop damages. So this water has to get pumped to, a creek, small creeks, and a lot of times it's 2-3 miles away, or to a larger lake. Have some pictures up there for what that looks like. And remember, the last winter, we had near record snowfall events, and so the first 2 months coming into the spring of 2023 was all dewatering before they could even put pipe in the ground. But that's what it looks like on your screen. Any questions with the dewatering effort? So it was the entire year, 12 miles of pipe in operations and pumping.
Kip, why are we responsible for that? I mean, shouldn't that have been in the contract or engineering? I thought we did a dewatering or something similar a year or two ago. We had a change order on that. Didn't the contractor take any of that into consideration, or was it an engineering thing, or what?
Great question, and I'll try to answer the first part of that. Paul or Kurt from Black & Veatch might be on the line, and they may want to chime in. So this Contract 5B is the first kind of major contract that we bid and approved. In that, how the contractor bid that, there was not a particular line item for dewatering, but what they had to do is they had to account for dewatering in their pipe install price. So it was kind of like include dewatering to some degree in your price, whatever you think is appropriate. I don't believe Black & Veatch, and I don't believe any of the contractors that bid on the project understood the volume of water that was going to come out of the construction site. And then also, all these contractors are from out of state. I think most of their understanding was that they could just pump it into the adjacent field and into the farmer's field and fill up a slough. So excellent point. I would say I was caught off guard on this one too. So I am partially to blame. I think Black and Veatch would be partially to blame on this one. I can happy to report moving forward in the contracts 5C and D that were just recently bid. What we did on that one is we actually called out where they had to discharge. So now they understand, okay, on this project, I have to pump 3-4 miles away. And then we did some extra geotechnical studies so that they can understand the volume of water to deal with.
So is Black and Veatch gonna step up and take some of this?
I can't speak for that one, but
I mean,
good,
I have
excellent
a hard time
question.
with that as a big contractor like that they wouldn't have checked that out a little farther.
Yeah, I live there and I just didn't anticipate the volume of water that was coming out of the trench and just surface water. It was just amazing. But I hope moving forward, by putting those locations down, they should understand now what's in the dewatering effort. And now it's a bid light item, so they actually have to call it out and put a number by it. And the two bidders clearly understood because they have millions of dollars in that line item.
For $965,000 or $56,000, I would think they would.
And just so you know, expect another one for 2024. Good question, so.
Paul, are you trying to weigh in? You wanted to take part of the cost, I think Jim was asking?
Sure, I'll weigh in. Can you hear me and see me okay?
Yep.
So here, when we do dewatering and when we do tunnel designs and open cut pipeline designs like this around the country, we typically have the specifications that we used on this project the first go around. And that is simply to have the contractor discharge the water someplace into a whatever is most convenient for them, a drainage ditch or whatever the case may be. And that works honestly 99% of the time because a drainage ditch is a rural road and it drains someplace. Water generally goes downhill and it drains to ever increasingly bigger waterways and it just, it works its way away from a site. Sometimes in the context of a more urban area, you dewater and you put the water into a storm sewer. In this particular area and this particular context, the water, it is so flat. I mean, first of all, as Kip said, there was a lot of water. And second, the water was so flat that the contractors could not do what they would typically do, and that is just flip a hose 50 feet, 150 feet, whatever the case may be, into a drainage zone and let the water drain away. They actually, as Kip pointed out, had to pump the water many, miles in some cases. So as we reviewed Garney's claim for this, we felt like, we asked ourselves the question, could they have reasonably ascertained during the information that was available to them at bid time, how far they would have to pump the water. And I think we came to the conclusion that even though Garney had worked out there before, because if you recall, they did contract 5A, and this is 5B, even though Garney worked out there before, they probably could not have anticipated the number of miles of discharge piping that they would have to lay. And I would add that with this cost, this is not a cost that, if this cost had been, if we had put this amount of discharge piping in the contract documents, this same cost would have been there. It would have been paid one way or the other. It would have been paid as part of the original contract as part of an addendum. So I don't think it was a mistake that it was not in the contracts, because as I said, we do this on contracts around the country successfully. this is kind of a unique area. And in hindsight, I think we saw with more clarity that we could have told them how far it would be to actually to have what Kip referred to as a blue line stream, a stream that could handle that amount of water. Future contracts that we are bidding do have that amount of specificity as to where they're going to have to discharge the water to in the contract documents. Does that help address the question?
Well, it does some, so does that mean that you're gonna help with that cost?
Well, so the point I was making is that this is not a new cost. If the cost of running this discharge piping had to be done as part of this project, if we had caught this, or if we had noted how the ambiguity of this in the contract documents, we would have specified this, and they would have included this cost for this change order in the original cost. Simply, that would have been, frankly, just a cleaner way to do it. But this is not a new or added cost. This is not a cost because of the mistake where they did something and then they had to go back and redo something different or rework something. This was simply enough of a change condition where we felt that they were justified in being paid the extra amount of money. So I don't know that I would agree that this was a mistake. I think with one of the things we have talked a lot about with TAC is that with projects this big and this complex, we learn a little bit about our specifications for this particular project with every time we execute one of the pipeline segments. We are constantly modifying our specifications, we think, to improve them and help them with this particular project. We went through about 10 to 12 changes that we made to our specs over the last couple of years with TAC when we met with them a couple of years ago. So really, I don't agree that this is a mistake, so to speak, and it's a mistake that Black and Beach would pay for. I think this was kind of a gray area where in reality, the contractor had responsibility to discharge the water to a place that was reasonable. That is clearly on them. But in reality, in hindsight, we could see from the information presented to them in the time of the bid, they would have a hard time determining that they needed several miles of pipeline.
Okay, thanks, Jim, for
Does that help
pushing them.
answer your question?
But we understand, yeah, thank you. Go ahead, Kip.
Okay, then the last, change order I want to call out, the large one out of the 11, is the differing site conditions for the tunnel under the railroad tracks. So on the left-hand side of your screen, I hope you can see the railroad tracks in there going left to right. Before you bid something like this, you go out and you poke one hole on one side of the tracks and you bore down, 30, 50 feet. You go on the other side and you bore down and you you pull up the sample and you look at it. The engineers take from those two holes, they have to anticipate and tell the contractor what to expect in bidding so that you have a contractor bidding on the same work. Problem is those two holes that you bore down, you're going to miss stuff, right? And what we found out here is once the contractor started digging the launch shaft and the receiving pits, they ran into a large chasm of rocks. If I can go, oh, there it is. So these are some of the photos of the rocks that came out, and trying to shrink this up. So the report called out, so many rocks, expect so many rocks over 30 inches, and expect, a certain volume of rock every volume of dirt excavated. And what happened is they exceeded that. And so this task order for 800 some thousand is for hitting the rocks, having to then to deal with the rocks, they had to put in a different shoring system. They were going to put sheet piles down. They had to go to I can't remember the name of it, slide rail system. So they had to go purchase or lease new equipment. They had to dig deeper so we had to move our tunnel down 10 feet. So that impacted the pipeline. We had to put longer pipeline extensions in that are custom built with the elbows, and so it just there's a trickle-down effect here. Move on to the next. Oh, I'm going to go back one. So that we don't encounter this again, let me back up. To reduce that risk, we can go put more holes in the ground, and maybe you pick up those rocks. I think what we're going to do moving forward is maybe let the contractor have a little bit more ability to use what they want, the method they want. So they can come in, they probably would have come in with this slide rail system, and it wasn't approved at the beginning. So moving forward, we'll let them have a little bit more control of their method that they want to use under this system. Any questions with those 11? I tried to talk about the two big ones. The TAC did recommend this going forward. I failed to mention that in your board book, tab D, Black and Veatch did write a recommendation for you guys to read. They are recommending moving these forward also. And I'd take any questions with this one.
Any questions?
Kip, could I make a couple observations?
Go ahead. And then I think Bill has a question.
We had time to talk about this. I know that the law is being asked to approve a couple change orders, and they're not insignificant. We had more time for this at the TAC, but when we look at and Kurt could pull up the specific numbers, but when we look at the total amount of work that's been contracted to date, more than $200 million. Our change orders to date are a tiny fraction of that $200 million that we have been contracted. So even though in aggregate, you might be looking at a couple change orders and thinking these are a couple of big change orders, we've had a number of deductive change orders along the way, and overall, the amount of money we're spending is within a fraction of a percent of the amount that has been contracted. So even though there's two change orders here, I don't hope the board doesn't think it's like, well, change order after change order. The reality is that we are managing this work within just a small fraction of the amount that's been bid. So overall, we are on very close track with these projects.
Mr. Chairman, I do have a table for you a
Later?
little
Okay.
bit later that'll address that.
Bill, did you have a question?
Mine was just we're in the lake bed of Lake Agassiz, and every farmer's got rocks in the field. Why wasn't it picked up originally?
And what you're saying, Kip, is this the two borings, we should have done more borings to know they were run into rocks.
If you have two borings, you're at risk, right? That you don't see everything under the ground. Do you spend more on geotechnical services trying to find what's under the ground? Or do you lay back and say, we'll handle it through change order? There's different ways to do it.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So do we have some action items here, or are you still going through that?
We would like you guys to approve change order number 4 under contract 5B.
Okay.
And then I was going to handle the other 2 separately, if that's okay.
Do I have a motion for change order 4, tab D?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second by Mark. Any further comments? Roll call, please.
Altough? Bigwood?
Aye.
Wojciechowski?
Yes.
Honsack?
Yes.
Kaiser?
Yes.
Karlsruhe?
Yes.
Erdman?
Yes.
Johnson? Mahoney?
Aye.
Riley?
Yes.
Schmaltz? Schmidt?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Go ahead, Kip.
Next item on your board book, and also the TAC did recommend moving this one forward. This is an amendment to task order 5632. And this is under contract 5B, so this is under the Garney contract. So final completion date for contract 5B was last December, so December of 2023. They're late. Because we didn't anticipate them not finishing their work, we now have to bring an amendment forward because we need to cover the people in the field watching out over the project. So construction phase services, our inspectors in the field, our surveyors in the field. Garney right now is anticipating that they'll be done at the end of this year. We feel like they'll have all the pipe in the ground at the end of this year, but we feel like they're gonna have to come back in the spring and kind of do some restoration activities. So this task order amendment that we're bringing forward to you is for construction phase services for 2 pipeline crews. We're gonna cover those 2 pipeline crews for this year. And that would take 2 RPRs or 2 inspectors in the field. Then next year, when they're just doing the restoration efforts, we're anticipating just 1 part-time person out there next year. Also on your screen, you can see some other things there that we're anticipating. There will be more submittals, more requests for information, possible change orders, and so all the paperwork that goes with construction. Also, something that we're adding is we are doing topographic surveys of topsoil. So in a farmer's field looks one way before the project. We're gonna do a topographic map of that. And when we're done, we'll be able to compare that to the final completion date. So if the farmer is saying, hey, my field looks a little bit different, we can compare there. So we're adding that survey to this amendment. The last item on there is, yep, we're anticipating 19 months. We do have how the costs laid out.
So this is amendment number 1?
This is amendment number 1 under the task order for construction phase services. The
Do I have a
total of this
motion?
amendment is $1,070,000. I know Blackevich is on the phone, if they want to add anything or have any questions.
Do I have a motion, please?
Carl's would move.
Is there a second? Moved and seconded. I think Paul's kind of talked about we're still staying within budget. I'd just like to continue to move along just because we got a few other things we have to get through today. So unless there's an objection, could I have a roll call vote, please?
Schmidt,
Yes.
Schmaltz, Riley,
Yes.
Mahoney,
Yes.
Johnson, Erdman,
Yes.
Karlsruhe,
Yes.
Kaiser,
Yes.
Bonsack,
Yes.
Bochensky,
Yes.
Bigwood,
Yes.
Altough.
You
Motion carried.
confused us going backwards. You kind of turn it up a little bit, huh? Okay, catch it on our stuff. Okay, Kip, you're on again.
Thank you. Last item for you is change order number 1 under contract 5D. This is, we were going to tunnel underneath this jurisdictional wetland on your screen, the green shape right there. We're going to tunnel underneath that jurisdictional wetland. However, through meeting with leadership of LAWA and Garrison Diversion, we're going to pick a little bit different strategy. We're going to use a nationwide strategy, and we're going to open cut this. And I know you're short of time, so next meeting in July, we're going to bring this whole topic back to you. We'll have Tammy talk to you about risk and permits and all those good things. But in the end, this saves the contract $2.3 million by removing this tunnel. The estimated length is 345 feet. Snippet for next time, we're going to bring back to you hopefully a savings of $50 million on other items like this. So we'd be asking for
There was a
approval.
movie
on
that
this one.
said, once you had me at hello, you had it as 2.3 million. That's very nicely, thank you, but
Yeah, so we'd like approval on this tunnel removal.
yes. Do you have a motion, please? Is there a second?
Second.
You guys got to be on the deductions part. That's a good one to have your names on a motion, because you say you were saving us money. Any other discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Altough, Bigwood,
Yes.
Bochensky,
Yes.
Bonsack,
Yes.
Kaiser,
Yes.
Karlsruhe,
Yes.
Erdman,
Yes.
Johnson. Mahoney.
Aye.
Riley.
Yes.
Schmaltz. Schmidt.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Kip, how long are your construction updates and work plan updates?
I think it'd be best if I skip that. I'll bring you a
Okay.
construction update in July, but to Paul's point on your screen,
Yep.
you have contracted $218 million worth of construction with the change orders today that you just approved. I assumed that you would approve those. You're $1 million coming back to the program. So right now, your revised contract price is $217 million, so you're doing a really good job on change orders. It's 0.5%.
I would say just as a tactic, maybe show the deductions first next time and then show the add-ons.
Will do. And yeah, everything else I'll just skip for today and we'll bring back
Okay.
to you in July. Thank you.
LAWA financial report, Ashley? Is she on remotely? Yep.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, this is for January 1st through May 31st of 2024. For the 2024 income total budget is $80,000. We've received $33,300 with a balance remaining of $46,700. For expenditures, the total budget is $205,550. We've expended $21,132 for a balance remaining of $184,418. At the beginning of the year, the balance was $380,851. Income received is $33,300. Expenditures of $21,132 with an ending bank balance of $393,000. The two items highlighted are the two payments that we've made since we last met, and copies of those are on tab J for your reference. That is all I have.
Very good. So the only action item is bills paid, tab J, we have to approve?
Yes.
Can I have a motion, please? Is there a second? Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Alta. Bigwood.
Yes.
Bochenski.
Yes.
Bonsack.
Yes.
Kaiser.
Yes.
Karlsruhe.
Yes.
Erdman.
Yes.
Johnson. Mahoney.
Aye.
Riley.
Yes.
Schmaltz. Schmidt.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Very good. DC lobbyist cost share. This is a discussion I had with the Garrison team, Dwayne. We have a lobbyist in Washington that we're working on. This is for the federal money we're trying to do for NWAS. The only thing I noticed is I looked at the work that's been done, and Dwayne, you guys have been meeting all year, basically getting things ready for an ask on a federal set. But is that Garrison has a variety of things that they're asking for that kind of overwhelms us. I mean, Red River is asking for something, but we're paying half of it. So I asked politely, Garrison, could you think maybe since you have more stuffs on the docket, could you perhaps pay 75% and we pay 25%? So I think the motion probably we're requesting is to ask Garrison to consider that, right, Dwayne? Wouldn't that be the best way to do this?
Take it back to our board.
And you take it back to your board. And then I just want to, Dwayne sometimes can say something like, I think I can deliver that, Tim. So Dwayne, did you want to say anything?
No, we understand, we've been doing a lot of irrigation work with this legal firm in Washington DC. And so there is, we are doing work that's unrelated to the LAWA. And so I can't speak for the board, but I think we'll look at it favorably. If not 75-25, it'll be very close.
I think Jay was nodding his head too, right? Okay, good. Okay, so the motion would be, would you ask Garrison Diversion consider 75-25 split? Can I have that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussion or comment? Roll call vote, please.
I'm sorry, who made the motion?
Bushinsky?
Bochenski and then Schmidt. Thank you.
And I think Mark, didn't you second? Or no?
Travis.
Travis?
Alta. Bigwood.
Yes.
Bochenski.
Yes.
Bonsack.
Yes.
Kaiser.
Yes.
Karlsruhe.
Yes.
Erdman.
Yes.
Johnson. Mahoney.
Yes.
Riley,
Yes.
Schmaltz. Schmidt.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Very good. You have a summary of the dues and cost share paid on tab K. Unfinished business is this board before had a consultation discussion about using more consultants. We had a Black and Veatch report on that and the different consultants utilized. It went to TAC to have a reconsideration and discussion, which we've had, but LAWA has never signed off on it. So I think, Kip, the contracts have been let as far as I know. And we just want to have it that it's unfinished business. We never fully approved that. So I would just like a motion to approve the consultant selection process. And the things between Dwayne and I is that with communication, we feel will be different in the future. So both LAWA and Garrison will be informed of any kind of actions like this. We've had great discussions of how to solve this in the future. And I think the things that happened in the future, we're working together to make sure everybody knows what's happening and both boards approve any kind of contracts like that. So I need that motion is to approve the consultant the selection that is done rather than process. Thanks, Mark. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Schmaltz, Riley,
Yes.
Mahoney,
Yes.
Johnson, Erdman,
Yes.
Karlsruhe,
Yes.
Kaiser,
Yes.
Bonsack, Buczynski,
No.
Bigwood,
Yes.
Alta. Motion carried.
Thank you. So the new business is legislative strategic support agreement, basically a discussion with a variety of board members. What we've talked about is LAWA now is to the point it's a big project, just like we talked about the millions of dollars today as we go through this. And the concern by LAWA board members is that we want maybe to be a little bit more at the table with what's going on, since as local users, we're coming up with payment for the project. The idea behind the legislative strategic support agreement with Brent Bogart is to begin to work on having basically somebody representing LAWA more in a proactive role. Not only represent LAWA, but to help us with things going forward, legislative support, how we're going to go different strategic issues, and also to help represent users. Perhaps the user talks to Garrison that doesn't quite feel representative. We think that a lot of our rural water systems sometimes feel, you know, we'd like to have an advocate in our room. And I think it's no different than sometimes we have two different legal teams that work on items that we try to make sure everybody's represented. So our recommendation will be we're going to move forward with a legislative support strategy, and Brent would become our consultant in this area and basically work for LAWA. So Mayor Buczynski, do you want to comment to this as well?
Yeah, I definitely agree. You know, the end users need to be supported. I think LAWA and Garrison are two separate entities, and I think LAWA needs to be able to not just be a shell for what Garrison's trying to do. So I think it's important as the project moves together that LAWA has some administrative support too, and that the users feel that they're supported by LAWA. As we state every time that we go to session, we say LAWA supports the users, Garrison's representing the state. So I think this is a good step in that direction. So we're definitely supportive.
Any questions or comments about the contract? I know you just got it this week, so it's kind of quick on you, but we're going to try to move forward and get things done. But I think it's a critical session. I think Dwayne and I agree with what our state's going to do, and it's also a critical session in Fedware, or what the feds might do. So I think we really have to have our best foot forward. And I think board members in LAWA, you might be asked to do a little more, just because in a sense, I think you're going to be maybe, quote, a little more responsible. And I think to the users, we owe it to them, is that we probably have to be in the room, because you can do two things on maintenance, and you might look at it different if you're paying. I know when I'm out to dinner with Buczynski and he's paying, I look at the menu a little bit different. So I think you always got to kind of think about that as who do you represent. So I think that's what we'd like to do. So any questions, Commissioner John Shockley?
Mr. Chair, if this is approved, I would ask that the motion would be approved contingent upon my review of the agreement.
Okay. So John has suggested motion. Do I have that motion?
So moved, Schmidt.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion or questions about this?
Mr. Chairman,
Dave?
just, John, I couldn't hear what you said.
I was suggesting that since they're still working out a draft agreement, that the approval of it would be contingent upon my final review to make sure that we're in compliance with North Dakota law.
Thank you.
Do you think it's a good idea, Dave?
Sounds like it.
Okay. Roll call vote, please. Or Brent, you want to say something that you're on here, we're talking about you anyway?
No, I just look forward to working with everyone and keeping the project with positive momentum going forward.
Thank you.
Sure, I want to modify my motion to include contingent upon final legal review.
Okay,
Yeah, I agree. I'll second.
agree? Okay. Roll call vote, please.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Schmaltz. Riley,
Yes.
Mahoney,
Yes.
Johnson, Erdman,
Yes.
Karlsruhe,
Yes.
Kaiser,
Yes.
Bohnsack,
Yes.
Bochenski,
Yes.
Bigwood,
Yes.
Altough. Motion carried.
Thank you. Second thing, board members, what we've talked about a little bit is just kind of looking at our bylaws. And when you look at the bylaws, what role is Lake Agassiz in the Red River Valley water supply? And sometimes you look at that and may want to redefine what we do. We have a finance committee and a TAC committee that are made up of a lot of members, but they don't all show up. Do they all need to be there? How many people should be at the TAC and how many people should be at finance? And which people do you want in the room in regards to that? The other issue is NAS and other large systems have looked at weighted votes because it's who's put the money in a way. So you have to kind of look at, you don't necessarily want your smallest user to dictate necessarily some of the items. So some of the system, they've done a more weighted vote, and that's what we're looking at. And again, all we're distributing the bylaws today is for you to observe, look at. We would do the first reading next meeting, but we are going to ask the board sometimes. We'll probably start to meet on a monthly basis because things are starting to move a little bit, and it just will take more of our attention to do that as well. So I'll have John Shockley explain the bylaw changes. We've engaged him to look at them and kind of look at it from LAWA's, viewpoint, in a sense, to protect this board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and recognizing that we're short on time, I'm just going to give a high-level overview. First of all, this is just, I distributed a second version based upon some comments that I'd received over the last couple of days, and that's, it was handed out with the red lines. And I'll just go briefly page by page. The front page is just reciting.
Did you send a copy of those online as well, or will they?
I can do that. I did
Okay,
not send it
thank
online. The first page is essentially just reciting state law and providing some definitions within the bylaws so that some of the terminology is more clear. The second page is cleanups, as is the third page of your red lines, as is the fourth page. As the chair had alluded to on page 5 is when we start getting into more substantive issues. Under 613904 of the Century Code, LAWA is allowed to have weighted voting. It is something that you can consider in your bylaws. And so an initial draft, it was, we were providing 50% for any nomination, up to 50% cap. The initial comments they received back that wouldn't necessarily be favorable because one party could potentially have a veto then. And so the maximum weight would be 48%. So even if a system had 68% of the capacity, the maximum voting they would have is 48%. So if they were trying to block some type of initiative or action, they would need at least one or two other smaller users to join with them. I did put in brackets for number 5, and over the next month, if you could kind of think through issues that you think would need a supermajority vote on, I think that's probably another way to protect some of the smaller users. I have a few ideas that I was going to add regarding what would require a supermajority vote. But if you could think about that over the next month of those really important issues that you would want to see a supermajority or percentage of the weight voting. If you continue on, we did add some language on, it would be page 7 of the handout. We're adding, making it very clear that LAWA can go ahead and hire engineers, attorneys, contractors, and consultants. That's provided in state statute, but we just wanted to reflect that in the bylaws. And then in the version that you saw, and I found this really interesting, that was in the packet, we asked the Garrison staff to go back and what was the actual intent of the parties a number of years ago about the actual composition of the finance committee and the technical advisory committee. And one committee had up to 36 participants and the other committee had up to 18. It almost became unworkable. And as you've heard, not everybody was showing up to those committee meetings. And so what, in this version, after some initial discussion, we're proposing that Grand Forks and Fargo would respectively have 2 and 3 member appointments. And then the additional, there would be additional 4 members that would be appointed by the small users. I haven't really figured out who should be making those appointments, and that might be more based upon who, on a percentage of what allocation you're taking. It's something to think about over the next month if you have some ideas about how to appoint those 4 members. I think 9 people for the finance committee and the technical advisory committee probably makes more sense. It's a more manageable size for a committee where you can really get focused in on technical issues. And then I tried to identify what the actual authority and what are the finance committees and technical committees doing. Just really housekeeping. We have some really great committee work and great work from the chairs, but sometimes I think they kind of wonder what exactly is my authority as chair. So trying to clean that up. If you could review those over the next month, feel free to provide myself feedback. Brent or the mayor or the chair or vice chair, they'll make sure and get it to me, and we can have it on a first reading next month. So happy to answer any questions, but I know your time is limited, so.
Thoughts of the group? Sound okay, or think we should do something different? Surely, you know, it's a lot for you to digest in one day, but would like you to look at it. But I would like to have finance and technical be more functional, and I think it'd be better for us in regards to that. And we haven't looked at this before, but we're now into a $1.1 billion project, and I just think we have to redefine our board, because when we were spending $1 million, it wasn't very much, but now we are spending big money, and I think this would kind of work. And you know, Bernie isn't a small user, he's a big user, but he has concerns about his community, how much this thing costs. I think any small user would have that. I'm very pleased with how many are signing up. That's been a great deal. But I really think we have to pay attention to the small user, because they're a big part of this project and how we go forward. I think Mayor Bushinsky and I have also talked about is when we go to the legislative body board members and how we can get the legislative team on board with continuing to finance this, because it is a big project to the committee. But that's kind of why this came about, and that's kind of why we're kind of moving things along, because like it or not, it's June, and boy, time goes past pretty fast by the time we hit January, so we'd like to be prepared. So this is just for information today. There's no vote on this today. We normally would be, John, you would say a first and second reading. We'd start in July, first reading, and a second reading in August. So if there are some things you didn't take it back and your team looks at it and said, hey, we'd like to change it, that's fine. The other help I'd like from the board is if you have some suggestions how you'd like that technical committee to be and how you would like that finance committee to be, who do you think? And some of you know, people are experts in different areas. Hey, this guy might be good on that committee as well, if they have the time. And that's the only thing I found out. A lot of meetings are very poorly attended, so it doesn't make sense that there's a big board with nobody there. So. The other thing that came attention as we talked to our lobbyists is that there are some bills being prepared at the federal level with Hoven and NWAS, and Dwayne's going to give us an update now. So you may start hearing about this as we go future in the next few months.
Okay, so we've been working closely with Senator Hoven's staff, the Bureau of Reclamation, the tribes, and the Natural Resources Trust to put this bill together. And the last we heard from the senator's staff is they'll probably drop it in the hopper after the 4th of July sometime. And so if that indeed happens and they've done all the negotiations on it before they submit it that they want to do, you might start hearing about that in the press, I would think. So just Lawa and Garrison Share, a legal firm in Washington DC, and they've been working on this pretty strongly for over a year. So we're finally getting to the, we'd like to say finish line, but we're actually getting to the starting point. So
And how much is in there for Red River?
454 million.
Good. Just wanted all the members to know we're still asking for big money, and Senator was in this room and said he'd try to get us for us, so I'm glad this is moving forward. Mayor Bashinsky, any other things for the good of the order, or should we have the mayor of Valley City close this out, or?
It didn't say in my information that I had to speak or think. So you guys can close it out just fine.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank you all because we finished. I started late. I apologize for that, but we still finished before 3:15. I got a diversion board coming up next, so I appreciate that. And again, short notice for the meeting. Appreciate everybody showed up, but it's just things are moving, and we just started talking as this board has to get a little bit more active and involved, and we'd like to see that happen. So thank you again for your attention. Meeting adjourned.